Hey guys, we're back. We have not, Johnny McGonigal and I have not been together for a while. We've been busy. PTO. I know that Johnny's done some world traveling. I've been off for a little bit, but it hasn't been a slow summer for Penn State at all with what's going on with recruiting. But Johnny, two things. I believe happy birthday wishes are in order to you, sir. If I read one of your last texts correctly, I hope you had a very, very happy birthday. And also, I mean, we're now officially, I think, past the midpoint of July. I want to say we're in late July, and Big Ten Media Days are next week out in Indianapolis. That's really the kickoff to the 2024 season. All of that is exciting, but I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. We got a lot of Penn State football to talk about in the coming weeks, but also some news about this season, including the release of who's going to be the homecoming opponent. We have some video game news and maybe just some storyline thoughts heading into Big Ten Media Days. But how have you been?
I'm good, Bob. I'm good. Yeah, you are correct in saying that my birthday was on Monday.
Wow.
31 does not feel any different than 30. But I will say this was my best birthday in a while, given that I keep wanting to say NCAA 25. It's not NCAA sponsored. It's EA Sports College Football 25. I got the 3-day, the early access, paid an extra $20 or whatever it was, and was able to download that bad boy and start playing at 4:00 on Monday. So quite a birthday gift. First game, had to play with Penn State, see what they were working with and the ratings of all the players and stuff. And I ended up writing a couple of things up there on who is, who's rated what in the game. It's a really fun game. I'm sure some of the listeners maybe have already gotten that 3-day early access. If they didn't, I believe it releases Thursday or Friday worldwide. So that's been a lot of fun. PTO, it was good, and but raring to go here, Bob. You'll be out there in Indy for Big Ten Media Days next week, and then soon enough, August 3rd is going to roll around here for Media Day as training camp gets going.
Johnny, let's just cut to the chase for a lot of Penn State fans who have not gotten the early look at the video game. I'm not trying to be a smartass, but I am curious. How does Penn State's passing game look in the video game?
So I'll put it this way. Drew Aller's throw power is a 96. So the video game wants him to chuck it deep. And he throws a pretty deep ball. No, you know what? The ratings for the wide receivers are unsurprisingly kind of middle of the road. I think Fleming is like an 83. Harrison Wallace is an 80. And then you're getting into the 75, 76s with Liam Clifford, Amari Evans, Caden Saunders. But Julian Fleming is actually really fun to play with. He breaks a lot of tackles.
Good.
Nick Singleton is a 91 overall. His speed shows up in the game. Katron Allen, an 87. Thought he got a little disrespected there. Maybe those two.
I love video game disrespect on social media. I know the Penn State players have been vocal about it, but two things. What made you crack up the most? What response? I think Abdul Carter was really mad about. I think he had a pretty exceptional rating, but he was not happy overall. But also, who are, just talk about some of the higher rated Penn State players and whether you think they got their just due.
Yeah, I mean, Abdul's rated plenty high. He's a 91 overall. I think he's a third or fourth top defensive end in the game. So I don't see any disrespect there. I mean, if anything,
didn't he say he was unhappy on social media though?
I didn't see that, but if he did,
I think if he checked, I think he was not happy about some things.
He probably wanted to be 100 overall,
of course.
As every player wants to be. But Abdul, Nick Singleton, and KJ Winston, the safety, all three of those guys are 91 overalls. They are within EA's top 100 players. They're Penn State's top players. Tyler Warren is a 90. I think that's well-deserved. I think he's the third highest rated tight end in the game. And then you're looking at, I think Denai Dennis Sutton's an 85. Drew is an 88. Jalen Reed actually isn't in the game. There's a handful of guys who aren't in the game.
Oh, right.
And I think for the older guys, it's just that they forgot to opt in. Jalen Reed actually posted on social media earlier this week saying he'll be in the game in 2 to 3 weeks. He was late submitting his paperwork. And then there's a handful of like the summer enrollees, the freshmen, who aren't in the game, but I would expect them to be in the game in an update, a roster update. And what's cool too, Bob, is that at least from my understanding is as the season goes on, it might be week by week. It might be, every 2 weeks or so, but EA is going to be updating the player ratings as the season goes on. So a guy like Jamel Lyons, who I think is a 74 overall or 75. I mentioned Harrison Wallace is an 80. There's a handful of players that I think could see decent boosts as the season goes on. Tony Rojas is an 82.
Ooh. How about Winston? How about Winston? No?
KJ?
Yeah.
Yeah, KJ's a 91. So he's one of the 3 guys who.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. If you already said that, I'm sorry. I missed that.
No. You're good. You're good. No, it's Bo Prabula, for those interested, is a 76.
That could go up. That could go up. Luke Reynolds got a really nice bump. So the tight ends, Rappleyea isn't in the game. But you've got Warren as a 90. Luke Reynolds, the true freshman 5-star, is a 79. And they actually got his hair down. So he has these really long locks. They actually did a pretty good job with his hair. Something I noticed. Jerry Cross is a 78 and Khalil Dinkins a 75. So I can tell you played this a lot. You have them already memorized. That's a lot of respect for that. A lot. How many games with Penn State have you played already, Johnny?
Honestly, only a few, because I'm a big dynasty mode guy. And, look, if you're a Penn State fan and you want to do a dynasty mode with Penn State, by all means, that's fair. For me, I'm very much a pick a G5 team, kind of run the table, see if you get a better job offer kind of deal, like build a program up. I picked UNLV. And I believe I'm 8-0 or 9-0 in my dynasty so far, Bob, on the highest difficulty. So I played this game so much when it was NCAA 14, the last time it came out, and it's all coming back to me. Running Rebels.
One follow-up. Do they have a coaching rating for Coach Franklin in year 11, or do they not rate the coaches?
I don't believe they rate the coaches, no.
I just had to ask. Because I'm sure people will be curious to see what his rating would be, because obviously I'm sure it would be very high, but, there's a lot of good coaches in the Big Ten, and just curious to see if there was a number for that. But I can't imagine like what he would actually do in the game. But Johnny, let's pivot to real life and Penn State's 2024 schedule and the homecoming date and opponent have been announced. So many people thought there was an outside hope that it was, I think, going to be Ohio State. I don't think it was ever going to be Ohio State, judging by the way the TV game is. The TV, networks kind of have a large say in that. But it's going to be one of the new the former Pac-12 schools coming to Beaver Stadium, I think, in November. What are your thoughts on Penn State's homecoming opponent? And was that did you think it was going to be them, or did you think it might be somebody else?
Yeah. So the Penn State whiteout is going to be November 9th against Washington. Not surprised, just because of that uncertainty, like you said, Bob, kind of hanging over the Ohio State game on November 2nd. They made that a helmet stripe game, which is basically a whiteout plus a little strip of blue. If that's in the student section or in the north end zone, but a essential whiteout for Ohio State, regardless of when that game is going to be. Because if you're Penn State, and if say that game ends up being big noon kickoff on Fox, like you don't want your whiteout to be a noon kick. And so I believe I saw some reports out there saying Washington will either be a 3:30 or a 7 p.m. kick. And even if it's 3:30, it'll be nighttime by halftime at that point in November. So you'll still get that, that overshot of the crowd, the whiteout in the night sky and everything. So they'll have that for the recruiting brochures and everything else that goes on there. But yeah, not surprised with it being Washington. I mean, I know it's a completely different team this year. No Michael Penix, Jalen Polk, all those Roma Dunze and everyone else that kind of led them to what they did last year. But this is still, the national runner-up from last year, making it to the national title game and losing to Michigan. So, and with it being a new addition to the Big Ten, definitely some juice there. And the week after Ohio State, if Penn State's able to pull off that win, I mean, it'll be an even more charged environment.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But just another sign that the season is very, very close at hand. The off-season days are dwindling. Big Ten Media Days coming up in Indianapolis. It's going to be a 3-day event. I think Penn State's going to make an appearance on Wednesday. It's going to run Tuesday through Thursday of next week. I think Penn State's got a big I think they have a big NIL fundraising event, I think, in New Jersey, I think on that Thursday. So they really didn't – that was not really, I think, an option for them. But Wednesday's a good day. USC's going to be there. Johnny, the Big Ten Media Days with the new schools. Just what intrigues you the most? I mean, Penn State's going to see Washington. They're going to see USC. They're going to see UCLA. They get 2 of the 3 at home. They go to USC. No Oregon this year, but eventually they'll see them as well. When you look at the influence of the Pac-12, some really good programs, some really good coaches, and kind of the impact they could have on the Big Ten, which is now, I think, officially the Big 18, unofficially the Big 18. How do you think that's going to – those 3 teams, how do you think it's going to impact Penn State's schedule? How do you think it's going to impact Penn State's roster? How do you think it's going to impact the future of Penn State recruiting? I think it's fascinating. But if you just talk about this year and those 3 teams, those are not going to be easy games. Traveling to USC to face that passing game will not be easy. They get the other 2 at home. Just your thoughts maybe on some early storylines with Penn State and the new teams coming in from the Pac-12.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lincoln Riley is speaking the same day as James Franklin.
Yeah.
Right, Bob? So that'll be interesting just to hear Lincoln, talk. And like you mentioned, that trip out to USC is a big one on October 12th. Penn State gets UCLA and gets, obviously, Washington at home. And Oregon, crucially, off the schedule this year because I say crucially, they look like a real – I mean, just what they're bringing back and what they brought in the portal. Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback over from Oklahoma and UCF prior to that. Oregon looks like a team that could very well not only make the playoff but do some damage in the new 12-team playoff. So not getting them this year, I think, is a big deal for Penn State. But recruiting is going to be a storyline. I think there was a quote out there actually from Kirby Smart, the head coach at Georgia. It was yesterday or the day before, talking about the NIL money that Oregon, is getting or maybe getting from Nike and, they're obviously Phil Knight and their situation there out in Eugene. It's tough to compete with. Oregon on the recruiting trail is going to be tough to compete with. USC, UCLA, Washington, also tough to compete with. But I do think it helps Penn State in that they can sell to West Coast recruits that, we're going to be playing at least one game a season on the West Coast, whether it's in Oregon, Washington, or California. And you've seen to a certain extent already Penn State get some traction on the recruiting trail in the 2025 class in California. Darius Dixon being their highest rated recruit from Mater Dei out there. So yes, recruiting West Coast with those teams coming in is going to be a storyline. Just the teams themselves, like what they bring to the table. I really wish that offensive coordinators would be invited to Big Ten Media Days, not only for you guys to hear Andy Kotelnicki talk again, but Chip Kelly being the offensive coordinator at Ohio State after being UCLA's head coach is a really interesting storyline as well, Bob. You guys out there are going to have your hands full.
We are going to have our hands full for sure, and I hate to keep. I think Ohio State's talent speaks for itself. But when you think about what Ohio State's done this offseason, the overlooked storyline is going to be like Chip Kelly's impact on that offense because there are very few sharper offensive coaches. When we're just talking about he doesn't have to worry about being the head coach. He can just coach an offense. He can just install his running game. He can just get the best out of all his athletes. His running games are elite. He's great. I just remember when he was at Oregon, that was some cutting edge stuff. I think his impact at Ohio State is going to be one thing I think that'll really go a long way towards shaping, who might be the best team in the Big Ten. But bigger picture, Johnny, I just think those schools, even though, they're not necessarily, some of them are not necessarily known for defense, what they can do offensively. I just wonder how that's going to maybe impact how Big Ten schools and really good Big Ten schools approach offense, recruit offense. Ohio State's kind of ahead of the game when it comes to that. But you look at how Michigan's been constructed in recent years. I mean, they've been imposing, they've been physical, but I don't know if you would ever call them a dynamic offense. Penn State's had dynamic offenses in the past. I don't know. Recently, the 2022 offense obviously did some good things. But I just wonder, the Pac-12 schools got to get their acts together on defense, I think, for sure. But I think they're going to also influence how the Big Ten recruits and kind of, they're going to I think you're just going to have to score more points when you play these schools because what's going to win out? Is there going to be a more offensive minded conference? Are the Western schools going to have to pay more attention to defense?
Yeah, I know that's what I'm intrigued by, Bob, because on one end, like you mentioned, with USC, for example, and Lincoln Riley's offense coming into the conference, however long Lincoln Riley decides to stay at USC, guy likes to jump around a little bit, but is that gonna affect how Penn State or how other Big Ten teams recruit or construct their defense? Or we already know with Tom Allen coming in, Penn State's expected to play even more of a 4-2-5 look, this upcoming season. Is that a conscious effort, with some of these teams on the schedule, or is that just the way college football is heading these days? And I think it's a little bit more of the latter than the former, but the former can't be ignored either. And then on the flip side, these teams are going to have to play some defense, and they're, these Pac-12 teams, specifically like USC and UCLA, because I think Oregon and Washington, I mean, you look at Washington did last year, like I mentioned Adunze and Penix and those guys, but they were maulers in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Oregon in the trenches has been, recruiting out of their minds and have, Penny Sewell and the list goes on of guys that they've had on the offensive line and defensive lines. So I think it's really more so UCLA and USC stepping up a bit. I mean, UCLA had a great pass rush last year, but a lot of their production leaves. And so, when they come up against schools like not only Michigan, but Wisconsin and Iowa, and to maybe a lesser extent Minnesota, like teams that are going to want to just grind you into the earth, are they going to be able to hold up? So just even Penn State aside, just looking at the conference overall, we're sitting here in mid-July, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how some of these teams do on a rainy night in Madison, Wisconsin in November.
Yes, absolutely. If they go, it'll be, they got to go out. I think they're going to go out to Minnesota a little bit later in the year as well. Right out of the gate, I mean, playing at Morgantown, you think of West Virginia, you don't necessarily think of them as an intimidating offense, but they have two really good running backs. They were a pretty good team at the end of last year. That offense was. They have a veteran quarterback. They're replacing a couple of really good offensive linemen, but with a running game like that, it probably is not in Penn State's best interest to get behind that team at any point on the road because they could play keep away. They did early, and I think they did early last year in State College before Penn State took control of that game. So, yeah, I'm with you, Johnny. If you had like maybe one or two, when you think about Penn State's offseason since the Peach Bowl and the Ole Miss game, what jumps out to you as maybe the one most compelling storyline that's emerged between, so from, January 1st to say August 1st or the start of Big Ten Media Days? What to you is going to be something that you're going to remember the most, positive or negative or still up in the air, about Penn State's progress offseason going into 2024?
Yeah. So you mentioned something that has emerged. I wouldn't. I think the most intriguing, or the thing I'm most interested in, and a lot of fans are too, is seeing how the wide receivers fare this season. But I don't think that's something that has recently emerged. I think that's just something that's been ongoing,
Right.
over really the last 18 months or so. But the one development that happened this offseason that can't be overlooked, can't be understated, is the move for Abdul Carter to defensive end, because you lose Chop Robinson, you lose Adisa Isaac, you have Denai Dennis Sutton, who we both think is going to have a big season, but Abdul's move to D end and his versatility and his explosiveness in getting after the quarterback. We talk about some heavy passing offenses. We know Ohio State can move the ball in a lot of different ways. USC is going to be dropping back probably 30, 40 times when Penn State goes out there. Opportunities for Abdul Carter to show that he is one of, if not the best pass rusher, edge rusher in the country. So, and how that affects the rest of the defense.
Yeah.
I'm also intrigued by the secondary. We saw in the Peach Bowl, it was Cam Miller and Zion Tracy very much getting thrown into the fire a little bit with Kalen King, Johnny Dixon, Daquan Hardy, opting out and then moving on to the next level. They bring in AJ Harris, they bring in Jalen Kimber. The steps and the progress that Winston and Jalen Reed have made since they started as a pair at safety last season. So there's a lot of intrigue and a lot of talk around the offense, and understandably so, with Aller and the wide receivers and everything. But really intrigued to see how this defense, how this looks, not under Manny Diaz and the new pieces that Tom Allen will have to work with.
Yeah, I'm with you. You mentioned Tom wanting to play. He certainly is a fan of maybe the 4-2-5 or the 5 DB set. But if you look at Penn State's schedule, they're at some point they're going to have to deal with some pretty interesting running games. I mentioned West Virginia. Ohio State can do. They can play you any way they want to play you, whether throw it or run it. Especially with some of the additions they've had. Chip Kelly, Quinshon Judkins is another guy. But you mentioned the running games. I mean, Wisconsin can still run the ball. Minnesota can still run the ball. Illinois can still run the ball. So I do think that's compelling. I'm curious to see. I know they have a veteran defensive tackle group, and they have a lot of experience at defensive tackle, and I think that will help them. But they're still replacing some really good players on that defensive line. And I think the offensive line, I would say, replacing 3 starters, a first-round pick at left tackle, a guy that I think is going to eventually start for New England, and Caden Wallace at right tackle, a new center. Probably you would think it will be Nick Dawkins, but that's a lot of turnover. And I know, and you're just not really sure physically, like who are going to be the tackles. Is Drew Shelton going to be ready to shake off the rust after being kind of held out of pretty much the whole offseason? He's played a lot of snaps. Who will the right tackle be, and how quickly will Nick? I'm pretty sure it will be Nick will be emerge as the center. I think the line of scrimmage, almost as much as maybe the wideouts, is kind of what interests me the most about Penn State at the start of August. I think they have the talent at the positions at the line of scrimmage, but new faces, and you lose a lot of really good players who are going to do some good things in the NFL. There's no guarantee that all of the new parts will be functioning optimally, maybe at the start of the year. And when you look at who they face early in the season, I think on the road, I just think that's one that interests me. Although they did it 2 years ago at Purdue, I just think the line of scrimmage interests me maybe more than the wideouts, or as much as the wideouts, maybe at the start of the year.
Bob, a lot to ask James Franklin in Indianapolis next week. I mean, he'll have his podium press conference, and then as long as it's in keeping with the past, they'll have 30, 40 minutes at his own little table. So I'm sure, whether it's the receivers, Aller, line of scrimmage, like you mentioned, a lot to ask James next week in Indianapolis, and the players too that he's bringing with, Jalen Reed, Tyler Warren, and then I wanted to say Devon Ellies, but Devon there's a last name change there. It's Devon J. Thomas now. So Penn State fans, if you're sitting in Beaver Stadium for their first home game and there's an announcement there, and you're like, "Oh, where's Devon Ellies?" Like he No, but it was a name change. So just something for Penn State fans to keep in mind. And then also, I know we mentioned the whiteout with Washington, but just in terms of the rest of the game themes that came out, I mentioned that it's a helmet stripe for the Ohio State game. It's going to be a stripe out for the UCLA game, October 5th. That's always a cool look in the stadium, and that'll be UCLA's first road game, in the Big Ten, and so it should be a very interesting atmosphere there.
Agreed, Johnny. Agreed. We've almost got to the off-season finish line. We're recording this on July 17th. It'll be Big Ten Media Days next week. Penn State Media Day is the first Saturday in early August. They'll be practicing. So it's been a fun off-season. It's been a very active off-season for Penn State, whether it's been player additions. James has reshaped his coaching staff with the coordinators. There's been a lot of recruiting news, a lot of it very, very good for Penn State. So I think the Penn State fans should be pleased about what's transpired in the offseason. But all of that's not going to matter unless they can maybe take a step forward in the new Big Ten Conference. So, Johnny, it's good seeing you. You look great for 31. I would have guessed you were only 29, 30 years old. So that's a feather. That's a feather in your cap. But it's good talking with you. We'll talk some more, I think, next week. Enjoy the rest of your summer, Johnny, and also Penn State fans, enjoy the rest of your summer. But it's almost football season, guys.
And enjoy EA Sports College Football 25. I know I will be.